Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book. And before we get started tonight, I'll do just a couple of general announcements, let everybody know what's going on with us as everyone gets the notification that we have gone live. So first up, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are still doing a mix of in-store and virtual events. So next up tomorrow, I'm going to be chatting with Valerie Burns, Lorian Berenson, Daryl Wood-Gerber, and Darcy Hanna about their newest cozy mysteries. We're going to theme it because they're all about food and animals. So it's our Plates and Pets event. Thursday night, we're going to have Alice Feeney in store. So as you look at the Murder by the Book website, which is murderbooks.com, you're going to see that our events are either going to be listed as in-store or virtual. We're not doing anything hybrid yet because we just haven't figured out and invested in the technology to be able to do that. I know a lot of people kind of assume that it's just point a camera at the authors that are talking, but there's a few more pieces as we have found. So we're not quite ready to do hybrid yet, but we hope to get there at some point. Like I said, lots of great stuff coming up. If you were not able to make one of our in-store events, you can always order signed copies online. We're happy to ship. If you're watching our virtual events, we're also happy to ship. You can just visit us at murderbooks.com and we can get stuff out to you. We are still offering free media mail on all of our orders over $75. Tonight, we're really excited to have Nev March and Isabella Maldonado with us. So I'm going to bring them out. While they are chatting this evening, if you have questions for either of them, please post those either in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will leave some time to get to those. First up, I'm going to bring Nev out. How are you tonight, Nev?
Hello. Doing well.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much for doing this with us tonight.
Welcome. I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you for organizing this.
Oh, our pleasure. So Nev March is the winner of the Minotaur Books Mystery Writers of America First Crime Novel Award for her award-winning Edgar finalist debut, Murder in Old Bombay. Leaving a long career in business analysis in 2015, she returned to her passion, writing fiction. She is a member of the Mystery Writers of America and Crime Writers of Color. A Parsee Zoroastrian herself, Nev lives with her husband and sons in New Jersey. Peril at the Exposition is her most recent release. I'm going to bring Isabella out. There we go. There's a copy. How are you tonight, Isabella?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us this evening. So Isabella is the award-winning and Wall Street Journal bestselling author of the Detective Cruise series and of The Cipher and A Different Dawn in the Nina Guerrero series. Before turning to crime fiction, she wore a gun and badge in real life, a graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, and the first Latina to attain the rank of captain in her police department. She retired as the commander of special investigations and forensics. During more than 2 decades on the force, she served as a hostage negotiator, department spokesperson, and district station commander. She uses her extensive law enforcement background to bring a realistic edge to her writing. She lives in the Phoenix area with her family, and her most recent release is The Falcon, which just came out at the end of June. So as I mentioned, as Isabella and Nev are chatting this evening, if you all have questions for them, please post those and we will get to them in a little bit. But for now, Nev and Isabella, I'm going to turn it over to you guys and sit back and watch.
Great. Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. And I couldn't be more happy because this has been a sort of dream for me. Isabella and I were on a panel some time ago, and I remember going, wow, she really has the authentic FBI experience. And so, of course, I had to run out and get this, the Cipher. I put the other hand up. The Cipher is the way it is written. Where the heck is the camera? There you go. The Cipher. And it is gripping. So I wanted to ask Isabella a few questions, and I asked Murder by the Book, would they set this up, and they kindly agreed. So I'm so pleased. And thank you, Isabella, for agreeing to do this with me. I'm learning, right? I've got 2 books out. I'm writing the 3rd, and you have 2 series out. So definitely wanted to ask you a few questions about how your process, how you put things together, how they develop, how they grow, where these ideas come from, and how you put them all together. Like, where's that click moment where it all comes together? And that's part of the joy of writing for me, is when that happens. So let me quickly just restart this. Why did you choose writing And of course, feels like crime writing is a perfect area for you. But tell us how this happened.
Yeah. I sometimes call it going from like a cop to being a writer. Is it really my journey to the dark side? I don't know. It's kind of a good question, but yeah, it seems like an unlikely switch. But what happened with me is I always knew that I wanted to write, but when I was much, much younger, I wasn't blessed the way some writers can, like at 19 years old, write the most brilliant, insightful stuff. That wasn't me. I felt like I didn't have enough life experience under my belt. So I ended up going into law enforcement, and that gave me lots of life experience. Disturbing life experience, but it definitely, it gave me plenty of material. But I always loved writing, and I always was a voracious reader the whole time. So then when I left the department, I retired just a couple of years early in order to have a little one, but I spent more than 22 years with a gun and badge. So that was, plenty of time. But once I left the department, that's when I decided I wanted to write. And people do, I've been asked before, because true crime is very popular, people have asked me, why don't you write true crime? You certainly, you have the chops to do it. But at this point, I mean, I will never say never, but at this point, I've only been interested in writing fiction. And I think it is directly because of my experience in real life in law enforcement, because I like to write things and have them turn out the way they should instead of the way they do.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
And that's, what? And this is something too about you. Now, for when we were on the panel before, I was so fascinated by your concept in your book. I'll show you. Let me grab this. So yeah, I don't have a book to hold up, but if you all can see Murder in Old Bombay. So you see, I'm listening to it. Let's say I'm on chapter 19 right now. So I'm listening to the audio book. And oh my gosh, it's every bit as fascinating as I thought it would be. The narrator is brilliant. But what I like about it is it's like Sherlock Holmes meets Downton Abbey in India in the time of the Raj. Okay, is that fair to say it that way? It's like everything you could possibly want wrapped up in one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that would be a good log line. You'd have to wrap up a couple more things in there, but yeah. It's a good way to show the breadth of it. Thank you, and I so appreciate you saying that. And to know that you're enjoying it is doubly delicious for me. It's always wonderful when readers write and they get the story and something resonates. Different things resonate, as you know. I'm sure tons of folks are writing to you what exactly it is that got them, right? Just really got them. That's wonderful. And then to know that you're feeling that way is just, I can't tell you. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah. That's wonderful. So you know what it takes. You know how hard this is to build. How does it happen for you? Do you get the character, or is there some old case, God forbid, that is haunting you that you say, okay, I'm going to fictionally solve this because this is how it should happen?
The answer is like yes to all of the above. You had mentioned earlier about writing. I've written 2 series now. I actually just finished writing. I'm in developmental edits for the first book of a new series. So I'm starting a 3rd series, but so I write like closed series as opposed to open-ended. And so what I do is, because I know I'm going to write a closed series, I become attracted to a character, and I think to myself, okay, what is the main character? What is her journey going to be? What is her character arc? And because I know there's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end to her character arc, I can make it very steep. I can make her have, like, she can really learn a lot of life lessons, and she can really do a lot. And so it's really interesting. But what I do is, even before I start writing the first book, I kind of already have in mind what I want her journey to be. I say her.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point I could certainly write a series with a male lead character. I mean, that's one thing. I'm very fortunate. People have said I do write men very well. And I think the reason is just because I've been in a male-oriented, male-dominated profession for so long. I've almost, there's many times in different assignments I was the only woman on the squad or in the particular. So it's like I really work with men a lot, and I feel like I, have an understanding and an ability, and after you get to know them, especially in a job like being a cop, you work together so tightly that after a while they drop their guard and they just talk like they would with another guy, and you do kind of learn, how they talk. So I feel like I can do that. But at this point, I've written female rather protagonists. And so I know where I want them to be. And I know kind of the journey I want them to take. And I do have that in mind ahead of time. How I get there, I don't know. It's like I start off in New York. I know I want to end up in LA. But how I get to LA, who knows? That I can go all over the place. So that's kind of how it goes.
Got it. Do you outline when you're in one specific book? I know you have a sense of the second and the third and how the character is going to get impacted, but when you're in any one of those books, do you outline chapter by chapter, or you kind of let it evolve?
It's funny. It's an evolving process. I've done it many different ways. I often joke that, of course, I outline, because what else would I have to deviate from?
Oh, that is precious. That is so true.
Yeah, right. I mean, but I feel like it helps me to start the process if I have a goal in mind. And I will end up making all kinds of different, side trips. I think when we were talking before, you called them side trips.
Yes,
and absolutely. That's what they are. And so, yeah, I do that. And I find that it's very functional and very helpful to be able to, have these sort of side trips, that we call ourselves plotters versus pantsers. And now there's ploncers, because I guess the other two aren't weird enough. That's like a combination of the two. So,
right.
So what do you call yourself?
Yeah, in between a plotter and a pantser. So I do write. I agonize over the outline, probably far more than I should, because I want to weave in historical things. And as I do the research, I realize that, ships didn't have wireless until way after this, so they cannot get a cable when they're in the mid-Atlantic. That kind of stuff changes the outline. But then there's also the characters in Peril, for example. This one that's just come out, there was this, again, I'm trying to find, where is the camera? There you go. Okay. I had this character, Abigail, and it's because Diana is so new. She's an immigrant. She's not going to be, an effective detective when you've only been in the country 6 months, for goodness sake. You're still learning. I mean, I was here 6 months. I was so incredibly ignorant, just making all kinds of mistakes, not understanding what people meant. Just, the way that words are used, this American slang, for goodness sake. I probably sounded, conversant or articulate. So people would talk back to me with the American accent really fast. And then I would go deer in the headlights, like, what did you just say? So it was hard for me. It would be hard for Diana too. But I needed a guide character. So I came up with this character, Abigail, and whoa, midway, she completely changed. And that completely changed the book then, because you have to run with it. I think it's a gift when that happens, when a character does something that you do not expect or you did not plan. I think that's fabulous, because there's something in there to mine. So I'll go chase that, and it's going to deviate from the outline completely. So the outline keeps changing, and I have versions of it because there are multiple plot lines. in the mystery, and I want to have, cast the suspicion on A, cast the suspicion on B, cast the suspicion on C. Oh, is it A again? So when you have that going on, it needs to be outlined. But oh boy, Abigail came in and ruined it completely. But I think the book is so much richer for that. It drove my editor a little bananas because now we had to give the book to a sensitivity reader. Sorry, they call it authenticity reader. And so, there wasn't a word for a trans character in the 1890s. That the word transvestite comes from 1905, but the people still existed. And then how would they struggle with this identity when there is no real name for it, or even completely unacceptable socially? So how would they struggle with it? So she was a fabulous character, and I ran with it. Turned out very handy in the plot. It worked out very nicely. But yeah, sometimes these detours, I enjoy them, but then, oh my God, Isabella, the revisions, the revisions drive me crazy.
I have another sort of standard, the way that I describe, and people ask me about my writing process. And I'm trying to stop this, but currently I think the most accurate thing to say is that I write 3 books a year, but sadly I only publish 1.
Yeah, and all of those,
because of all the revisions, and the rewrites, the one that I'm just finishing up working on now. I mean, my gosh, I probably have written maybe 150 to 200,000 words somewhere along there, but it ended up being like 90,000 words.
Yeah.
But so many things got deleted and added, and oh my gosh, it's just hideous. Yeah. And I'm trying to be more efficient, but at this point, it is what it is.
And I think each book then has a life of its own, and it kind of insists on being a certain way. Yeah. I know that 3 times I've done this, the process has been completely different, and I felt like I had better control this 3rd go around. Of course, the revisions were, again, quite arduous, but it is still, each book just has such energy of its own. And then there's these chapters that when they play in your mind, I'm sure you've had this experience too, that you just can't wait to write them. And then everything in between, like, I know this has to happen, but I'm waiting to write that chapter. Those are some of the joys of being a working writer. Of course, the deadlines. How do you manage with your deadlines? You set yourself a schedule?
Yeah. How does it work? I do. Again, my schedule is something that I deviate from. It's like, I can't seem to, life keeps getting in the way. I have everything all planned out, and then life happens, and, things become completely chaotic. I live with my family. Obviously, I have, a young son, and there's always something going on there, and then a larger family where there's always things going on, and then everything else that happens. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge to try to keep to any kind of a, it's funny. Sometimes I've gone to, I've been on panels where other authors are like, oh yeah, I sit down at 8 a.m. and, I work till noon, then I take a 1-hour lunch break, and then I sit back down, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, where's all the knocking at the door, and where's, all the various things that happen? I don't know. I guess it doesn't.
Yeah. Stephen King's book on writing, right?
Yes, I've read that
wonderful phrase. The writing serves your life. It's not the other way around, that your life serves your writing.
Yeah.
And I remind myself when I have to go, dash off and turn off the pressure cooker, or,
yes.
Just do the things that we have to do, go shopping, whatever. And my writing serves my life. Remember that.
I don't. I'm waiting for one day. I'll have the domestic staff who will be able to take care of these things. Yeah, no, that's not happening. It's no, you still have to do all these different things. And actually, and speaking about family, one of the things I wanted to bring up as far as like our characters and stuff that we write, it is really interesting. I noticed reading your book that we both are writing about orphans. in the Guerrera series. That the first series is different, but the second series, I am writing about an FBI agent hunting a serial killer. And for all of you Criminal Minds fans who need a fix, this is that fix. It features the BAU and things like that. But my main character is an orphan. She was raised in foster care. She was abandoned left in a dumpster when she was only 1 month old. Very tragic backstory. Pulled herself up from that and went on to become sort of a champion of people who, are victimized. And she does not want to have that happen anymore. And what's interesting is when I was reading about your main character, and it's really interesting, maybe you want to explain a little bit about him, but he also has a situation where he grew up without his parents.
Yeah. So Captain Jim Agnihotri is a mixed race character. He's essentially, his father was English and his mother Indian, which is in that time during the Raj, if the father did not acknowledge the child, that child was doomed essentially, because to be illegitimate is bad enough in any era, but in the Victorian era, it was essentially career suicide. There was no career, so Captain Jim is left in an orphanage by his mother because she has tuberculosis. She's probably a teenager or very young, and so she knows it's not good, and leaves him in an orphanage. And essentially, he looks English. So I made a couple of choices very early on in my writing journey, for this book that turned out to be foundational. That turned out to be very, very crucial. So the book Murder in Old Bombay, the debut book, was really about a real crime, a real tragedy that occurred in my community in 1891. There were these two very wealthy young women. They fell from the clock tower, not at the same time, but 4 minutes apart, in the middle of a busy university. So how can this happen? It was ruled a suicide ultimately, but there were 2 court cases and so on. And to date, we don't know exactly what happened. And this has haunted us. It's also become a bit of a cautionary tale for my community, that it's sort of code word for, you can't be sure you're safe even in daylight, is what it means. So the phrase was, remember those Godrej girls. They came from the Godrej family. But this character I needed a detective. I needed a detective that could travel in the society world, in the English world, as well as in the grungy villages and backwaters and docks and more seedy areas. And so making him Anglo-Indian allowed for that, because he would have the language and the understanding of native culture and the understanding of all the different ethnicities and communities in India. But he would also have the appearance that would allow him to pass for white. So allowing him that duality was the decision. But the moment I did that, I introduced race as a foundational topic, and it changed the book. It added in all these additional layers, because as I wrote about the Parsee community that I belong to, which is a well-to-do and privileged community in India, very tiny community, I realized that my own community needed to understand how our behavior and our closedness is affecting others. And so it became a little bit of a plea to my own community to be a little bit more liberal, to start accepting people who want to be part of the community rather than excluding them because we have this focus on preserving our identity or preserving our ethnicity, and fear that we'll somehow be diluted and disappear. That is the big fear within the community. And so we're now, so pure that we are going to disappear as a population if we don't allow ourselves to be a little bit more broad-minded. So that turned into a subtle argument in the book. But as the mystery continued, I found myself realizing that this is also a feminist book. And as I was reading yours, I realized this is a feminist book. This is so empowering. There's that one scene, I'm not going to say any spoilers because this is pivotal to the book, but there was that one scene where I literally jumped up and I said, no, 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 no. I was like, no, let that not happen. But at the end of the book, I, put it down. It's like, yeah, I had that feeling of empowerment, and she's such a kick-ass woman. I love her. So why do you find that? And I'm asking this question really of myself as well, is why does the book take this turn where you have a social message in there? Sherlock Holmes books are purely about the mystery. It's something weird is happening. He figures it out. It's an intellectual puzzle. You leave going, oh, that's so cool. But it didn't ever tug at my heartstrings. Why does this happen when we're writing that the book has this other deeper meaning? Any conjecture?
Yeah, I think that it's because of, the way that we write today, I think more than anything. Now, obviously, there's newer versions of Sherlock Holmes. He's like obviously the most enduring character you can possibly imagine. And the newer like takes on Holmes does delve more into his inner psyche, and Watson as well sometimes. So there is more of that, because I think that today's readers are very sophisticated and they want multi-layered characters. And I think, in my opinion, it's no longer good enough to just tell a rip snorting tale, with a lot of action, or to solve a puzzle. People want to really, really, dig deep into the characters and delve into them. And I think, when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was writing the Holmes books, it was okay to have Sherlock be kind of an enigma. You really didn't know, how did he get to be the way he was? And you'll notice it's the more modern versions where you sort of understand, oh, okay, even like young Sherlock Holmes, how did he get to where he is? Because readers now want to know these things. But so I felt when I was writing, when I'm creating my characters, they need to, I do like to also write strong women, but not perfect women at all. Like, they all have various wounds of various kinds, and they're all compensating in various ways, some of them healthier than others, but it's always like you can understand. And so many readers have written to me, and they have said that they've like, oh my gosh, I feel like if Nina Guerrera could get through this, I can get through what I'm going through. And several of them like are trauma survivors. Like my main character is a trauma survivor, and several have written to me, and they're like, you know what, I could so identify with her, and I feel like she is showing that a trauma survivor can still be strong. You might have been broken, but you can heal, and you can find ways to even get past that. You may not ever be the same, but you will be able to get ahead, and you will be able to survive and even to overcome. And so that, and just so many people have written to me about how much that means to them. And, one of the most, it's funny, a couple of really, really touching letters. One of them was actually, a woman was going through chemotherapy, and she's like, I take the book in there and I read it while I'm having chemo, and it's like, gives me inspiration to fight and to keep fighting, and I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. And then it was kind of funny in the second book in the series, A Different Dawn, we find out about Nina's background. You learn about how did she come to be in that dumpster. You actually find that mystery is resolved in book 2. And the ending of that book is very powerful. And there was actually in one of the book reviews that appeared on Amazon, there was a man, he said, I am a 75-year-old man, and when I finished that book, I was crying. And I don't cry, but lots of people have said they had tears, but it was like tears of joy, not tears of sadness. Like, I don't believe in just depressing people for no reason, like I would not write Old Yeller, but it's that emotional resonance where you want to take someone on a really hard fought journey. And then at the very end, there's that emotional catharsis that pays off. Like, you want to reward the reader for going all the way through this journey and following your character through hell and back. And then here's your reward for doing that. You get to see how the story ends, which is another reason, kind of getting back to what I was saying earlier about why I write fiction, because that's the beauty of fiction. Because in real life, as we discussed earlier, in real life, crime is senseless. It's just totally senseless. So I like to be able to make sense of it in some way, shape, or form. So that's what I do.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think we write and also read crime fiction because we want to understand. We want to believe that there's a reason, that random things don't just happen like asteroids. That there is a reason that A connects to B connects to C, and maybe in real life we don't have a long enough view or a 360-degree camera to capture all those things. Maybe if we have the luxury of watching, I don't know, a story for 50 years, then we see how it comes out. But most often we don't. We see one chapter really of somebody's story. Yeah. And maybe if they're trusting of us, they tell us a little bit about what happened before. But how often do we get to see, the end or even the continuing story? So part of why this is some of the unusual things that I do is most romances end with a couple getting together. And I realized that, oh boy, that's the beginning of the story. There's so much conflict and challenge and ups and downs and joys and sorrows that come after that. So I have this couple now that is going through solving mysteries, because they're very much tied to the time. But there's also this couplehood journey that they're on. And so I haven't figured out, I wish I had a little bit more line of sight like you do with 3 books and how that's going to go. I haven't figured out exactly where the journey will take them, except that every adventure would reveal more and force them to reckon with their own assumptions or presumptions. I mean, talking about Victorian men and women, they had tons of presumptions. Women, had so many restrictions. I was watching the Emily Dickinson story, A Quiet Passion, and that movie just moved me to tears. I'm thinking of Emily Dickinson, not that it's a mystery by any means, but white woman, privileged, well-to-do, one would imagine she is the 1% of that era. She should be very happy. And instead, because of the restrictions on her, she was miserable. It's one of the saddest life stories that I've come across. And I realized, it's not just minority characters. It's not always minorities. I know you and I both write minority characters and have an affinity with the underdog. But I want to say that every human being perhaps has these challenges in different forms, whatever their form may take. Some may have a more privileged background, but may suffer from neglect. And some, may have all the joys of a loving family, but struggle to make college payments. So, there you go. There's that universality of experience. What we're struggling with may be different, but how we have to keep going is probably that unifying piece. So other writers, you mentioned that you like to leave the reader with a sense of empowerment and a sense of payoff. What other writers inspired you? And are there writers that you don't read anymore for whatever reason?
Well, actually, first, I just want to mention with Emily Dickinson, I'm also a fan of the Belle of Amherst, as she's known. But when I think of Emily Dickinson, actually, mentally I picture a bird in a gilded cage. So, it may have been gilded, but
Yeah.
it was definitely a cage,
Yeah.
So I know. And for such a brilliant soul to have those kind of restrictions, I can see why it would be torturous for her.
Yeah.
I can really see that.
Yeah.
So, but as far as other writers, it's funny. I read a lot of different kinds of things. I read both fiction and nonfiction, but as far as the fiction, crime writers, I do tend to get involved with those. And it's funny, when I was on the job, one of the crime writers that I would back in the day, I enjoyed listening to or reading, actually at that time, Michael Connelly's Harry Bosch books. One of the things I liked about them was that he went to the trouble to do all the research to make it very authentic. So, I mean, you really felt like you were in the LAPD walking through the hallways and stuff like that. I mean, you could tell he did the work. So that even as a law enforcement officer, I was able to be like, yes, I can totally believe that Harry Bosch exists. There would be some liberties taken, but it was never distracting. Then as I was making up my mind to write myself, I started looking at the female crime writers. Sarah Paretsky did a great deal to help women crime writers by being one of the founders of Sisters in Crime. I joined Sisters in Crime, and I became the president of the Phoenix Metro chapter in 2015, actually, of that, because it was really, it was very groundbreaking, back then, to be a female crime writer, especially, you just did not, things were much more challenging back then. And so she did that. Patricia Cornwell's another one, kind of groundbreaking in that sense. And then also total props to J.A. Jance. I fell in love with her stuff. It's funny because most people know her from her J.P. Beaumont series that's set a homicide detective in Seattle. But I got to know her and fell in love with her Joanna Brady series because it's set in Arizona. After I moved to Arizona, when I retired from law enforcement, like, it's when you're back east and you retire, you're given two options. You can either go to Arizona or Florida. That's it. Those are your two choices. So I chose Arizona because I like a dry heat. So anyway, when I moved to Arizona and retired, I wanted to find, some sort of something with local flavor. And so something set in the Southwest. And, so that was the Southwest was the Sheriff Joanna Brady, a female sheriff, in the Southwest. And I love that. And then I, sort of grew to love all of her stuff, and, absolutely amazing. And one of the things that really intrigued me about her too was that she makes all of the police procedural stuff quite accurate. Even though she was never on the force, you wouldn't know it. Okay. And she can also write male characters really very, very well. So I think that sort of thing is very inspirational, and I find that to be that way. And it's funny because I toyed with the idea of, should I use my first name or should I use initials like that?
Yeah.
Like other women who use their initials. Yeah. I went ahead and went with my full first name, but I do know it's funny because several fans, I've started getting more of a male reader following. In the beginning, not as much. Now I'm growing more. And what's funny is you'd be surprised how many times you'll see in the review, it'll say, I don't read female writers, but I love this one. This is the real deal. And, I feel it's very, because I write like a high octane thriller type thing. And there's really not romance in what I write. It's really not there. It's very, if there is anything at all, it's more like sort of hinted at, and then we keep moving with the action. So I always, so it's nice that, and a lot of men, they say that the women in their lives are the ones that told, oh, you've got to read this. And then they do. And they're like, wow, no one's bodice got ripped off. This is amazing. It's got, whatever. So, but yeah, it's sort of looking at all these different writers and then finding who's inspirational to you and why. And I want to give credit to where it's due. What writers do you find interesting to read?
So of course the classics, Hammett and Chandler and even Elmore Leonard, all very gritty writers. And my writing isn't particularly gritty, but just they're so real. How can you not? So those, of course, Christie and Holmes, Conan Doyle are the classics, but they're a little bit back in time. I think for more recent writers, if I move even to the 60s, Josephine Tay and Mary Stewart were two just delicious writers. Josephine Tay only wrote 6 books, but they're all masterpieces. And Mary Stewart kind of invented the genre called romantic suspense, because her love interest may or may not be the crook in most of her books. So there's that element of attraction plus doubt and suspicion and quandary, which is just delightful. But more recently, Sujata Massey writes stuff that is marvelous books that are set in India, that are set about 30 years after mine, so 1920s. And she has her characters based upon a real life lawyer. India's first practicing lawyer was a half Parsee woman, actually, that Cornelia Sorabji. And Cornelia Sorabji wrote 5 books, 5 autobiographies, actually, about her cases, and they are wonderful source material. So Sujata Massey is following along in some of those adventures, and just they just come to life. She is a charming character. Abir Mukherjee, his book 3 of his Sam Wyndham series, again set in India, 1920s, but he has a British detective, a Scotland Yard detective, who is transplanted to Calcutta and doesn't speak Bengali. How hard is it to cross-question a witness when you don't even speak their language? Luckily, he has a sidekick who does, a very smart little guy. And so Abir Mukherjee, just the voice, it's so droll, and British writers are wonderful. So just the book 3 of his series is called Smoke and Ashes, and probably has the best first chapter that I have ever read, ever.
Wow.
I even told him that on Instagram. So wonderful writer. Charlene Harris, she's famous for the Suki Sack House, the vampire stuff, but that's actually not her best writing. It just made it to the TV series and exploded, right? It just got so big. True Blood was the series, but she has 2 or 3 other series that are delightful, that are really mysteries, that I thought were very interesting. And the one I'm thinking of is a woman who's undercover. Well, she's actually in hiding. She isn't even undercover. She's in hiding, and she's a cleaning woman. And of course, as a cleaning woman, she gets to see the inside of everybody's houses. And so she ends up having to solve crimes because she just knows the people so well, I guess. Very interesting and different take on mysteries. Unusual amateur sleuths, but unusual approaches. Joanna Schaffhausen is riveting. She writes stuff like you you can't put it down. It's high octane. It's terrifying. Sorry, but you just gotta keep going, and it's so energizing when it does pay off. So Joanna Schaffhausen is wonderful. Sue Cox is another one who's a hidden gem, I call her. She's just so funny. She writes books that are set in San Francisco with this assortment of characters that is just delightful. I wish I had them as my neighbors. So lots of wonderful writers. I also read very, very varied genres. So there is an author who's been around for 20 years that very few people know, Boman Desai, Boman, Boman Desai. And his most recent book that I read is The Elephant Graveyard. and whoa, it is fantastic realism is, I think, the genre that took me completely by surprise. I believe it's the same genre that Salman Rushdie writes. Fantastic realism. So it is in the real world, but strange things happen. They're allowed to happen. Not even strange, supernatural, even things. But the way that they're written seems very, very real and very possible. Is the way I would describe it. So very, very varied reading list. From stuff in the 1800s to very trendy stuff. We are watching The Witcher right now, and oh, how we're enjoying it. I was even singing that song, right? Yeah, it's beautiful. Toss a coin to The Witcher. Now it's going to stick in everybody's memory. Like an earworm. So we are now in the 8:45 Eastern time mark. Let's ask whether John has any questions.
Hello. Yeah, so we have a few questions, and as anybody's watching us, we're getting to those. If you have more, please post those. So Isabella, I wanted to ask you, since you have this huge background in law enforcement, when you meet other authors and they discover this, or do you become like their new best friend and their new like research buddy?
I have gotten several questions, yes, from authors about that. Sometimes they'll ask me about all kinds of different legal questions or police procedural questions or forensic questions, or, because I've dealt with all those different things.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny because the issue is that I have more as a problem is sometimes I know too much. And then you put too much into the book, and I got to cut it back. And, and try to not overdo it with that. But yeah, I do get a lot of questions from other authors or aspiring authors about those things.
And in your research process, then, how do you stay current? Because, technology and all that stuff changes so quick. How do you stay up to date with kind of the changes?
Fortunately, I am blessed with having a lot of contacts in law enforcement. And you're absolutely right, because in particular, when I retired, I was the commander of special investigations and forensics. And so, the entire forensics lab and all the CSI guys and everything, they all worked under me. And so I was very current, but my goodness, things have changed so dramatically. So what I have done is, when I know I have new books coming out, I will actually get a hold of like a forensic lab director. I will meet with her. I will, give her what it is that I'm doing. And, she will tell me, she's like, oh yeah, we're not doing this anymore. Or yeah, this is antiquated with it, this kind of thing. And I will put her in the acknowledgments. When you see the acknowledgments, you'll see these people. And the same thing is true actually for the book that I'm working on right now. My new lead character is an FBI special agent, and she's on the New York JTTF, which is the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I interviewed a former director of the New York JTTF FBI. And so I interviewed that person extensively, got all kinds of information, stuff like that. They were okay doing it because, they know that as a law enforcement officer, first of all, I'll get it accurate. And second of all, I won't give away any secrets.
Yeah. So Nev, can you tell us all a little bit about the Minotaur Mystery Writers of America Best First Mystery Contest?
Absolutely happy to do that. This is a wonderful, wonderful way to break into writing as an author. So every year, Minotaur, which is an imprint of Macmillan, that is focused on detective stories. Within crime fiction, there's so many subgenres, and Minotaur is focused on detective stories. So Mystery Writers of America teamed up with the Minotaur imprint to put out this contest. It is actually administered by Mystery Writers of America. There are published authors that volunteer to be judges, and they get more than 600 submissions every year. The entire manuscript, set of manuscripts is distributed and judged, and multiple tiers. I have been a judge in the past, and it is quite a lot of work, but it's so rewarding. And then if there's a winner, there's not a guaranteed winner every year. But if there is a winner, it comes with an advance and a contract with Minotaur. So it's just fabulous. I had been pitching for 6 months straight. I had finished Murder in Old Bombay. It had a different title at the time. And I have to tell you, as a minority writer, it was incredibly difficult. I wrote 116 pitch letters, query letters to agents, declined, ignored. And 2 did reply. One of those 2 is now my agent. And so I was thrilled when I got an agent, and we started then sending out the manuscript to editors. 6 months into the process, before 6 months was up, I actually won that Minotaur award. I had thrown in my manuscript, submitted it, looked at the instructions, followed all the rules, tossed it in there, and forgot about it, thinking this is a lottery. It's a lottery. What are the chances, right? You buy a lottery ticket. Most of the time, I don't even remember to check it because what are the chances? And lo and behold, it was incredible when I won that award. I was the first Indian-born writer to win Minotaur's Best First Crime Novel Award. And I got to go to the Edgar Awards, and I got to speak at the Edgar Awards in front of Walter Mosley and Jonathan Massey and all these Gigi Pandya and all these marvelous writers are there. And here's little old me, such a newbie, getting to, it was just a dream come true. My husband even was astonished, saying, okay, so this is not just a hobby, huh? Yes, it's not. Yeah. So it was.
So what was it?
My career.
Yeah. So what was it like then to have won the award and you have your first book ready, but then all of a sudden you have to write another one? What was that like?
Yeah. So I didn't have to write another one very immediately. It so happened, just backing up a little bit, between 2015 and 2020, I went to India, I don't know, over a dozen times because my parents needed help for medical care. And so there was no point of me even interviewing for other jobs because, I didn't even know which month I would be in the country. I still don't remember exactly which month I was in the country. But Mom passed away in 2020. So I, ended up being, taking a few months really to process that. It so happened that the pandemic hit March 2020. And so I sewed masks for the next 3 months full time. There were no masks to be had. So I personally made more than 460 masks on my sewing machine. And I gave them away to every single person that I came across because people needed masks and we didn't have any. That saved me, actually. So I did not write. But the sewing machine saved me because Mom's loss was just devastating. And so after that, I, got together a little bit, and my agent started me on a bit of a routine saying, okay, let's talk every week. Jill Grosjean, God bless you. If you ever hear this interview, she saved me. She really did. And kept me on a roster, sort of on a routine or schedule of talking every week, turn in whatever you can. Mostly it was 2 to 3 chapters, and that got me back to writing. So the whole year really that I didn't, it was too raw really to do much. I don't know how functional I was at the time, but I was making masks. Yeah.
So Isabella, what has been the we've talked a lot with a lot of people about writing process throughout the pandemic. What has that been like for you?
Well, it was definitely different from what Nev explains. From the get-go, it was like I was right out of the chute. From the very, very first book I wrote, it sold immediately, and had a 3-book deal, and was immediately I had to get it going and get it done, and had deadlines and commitments, and they always would be coming right up and everything. And because of the crazy process I mentioned that I have, it's never like, I was never like, oh, I'm so far ahead, I can just relax. No, it was always, crazy for me. So even during, it's interesting, even during the pandemic, as a matter of fact, during that time period and just before that time period, that's when I was writing the Cipher, which was the one that became the breakout bestseller that they're going to make into a movie now. Which is so much fun. But I had no idea, when I was writing that book, that it was going to be, I was just like putting the final edits on it when when COVID struck. And, I was locked at home with a new puppy, and the puppy was like crazy, and I'm trying to concentrate, and oh my gosh, it was nuts. But it's always, I always feel like I'm, constantly playing catch up and everything. But I do manage to get it done somehow. It always comes together.
All right, so we are about time for this evening, but before we head out, we'll start with Nev. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on next?
Absolutely. So this is book 3 of the Captain Jim and Lady Diana mysteries. The couple is now on a steamship. They're going from New York to Liverpool, so it's a locked room mystery because the murderer cannot leave. Right. So they were on this British ship, and a foreign diplomat, a Spanish diplomat, is killed. There are consequences. So Captain Jim now has 6 days to solve the crime and hopefully avert an international incident. If you remember your history, this is the 1890s. That era is fraught. It's a few years before the Spanish-American War. So there's a lot going on globally and internationally. And here you have this young couple that is, time bound, right? There's a ticking clock. They need to solve the mystery before they arrive. And add to it, Captain Jim is acutely seasick.
Oh.
Perfect. And so, Isabella, what are you working on now? What do you have coming up next?
Well, so the other 2 of the other series are finished. So I am starting a brand new series, and this one features a Latina FBI agent. She is out of New York City's Joint Terrorism Task Force, but it's not a book about terrorism. It's where she is kind of, how can I put this? I know probably the best description. It was just announced in Publishers Weekly. The deal announcement came out, and it was described as Criminal Minds meets Squid Game.
Oh.
So yeah, I know, right? Okay, crazy. So yeah, she ends up getting she gets tangled into this situation where she's trapped with a bunch of killers, and she has to do anything to survive. And she has a background as an Army Ranger and a military code breaker. So she has to, not only, on the one hand, she has to try to remain undercover and not blow her cover. On another hand, she has to solve all these codes and break these puzzles. And then on another hand, she has to, literally fight for her life and do anything because everybody around her is trying to kill her, and she's trapped in there with them. So yeah, the usual boring, right?
Anything but. It sounds like anything but.
Yeah.
Nail biting, actually.
Yeah, right. It's going to be another crazy ride. Yeah.
Awesome. So that's going to do it for us tonight. So to recap, for anyone who might have joined us late, we have been chatting with Nev March, whose most recent release is Peril at the Exposition, and Isabella Maldonado, whose newest release is The Falcon. So Sarah DeVello, who we partner with, who hosts Mystery and Thriller Mavens, has also chatted with Isabella and Nev previously. So if you want to see her chats about their previous books, I know she chatted with Nev about Murder in Old Bombay and at least 2 of Isabella's books. I've dropped links to those previous chats. If you missed any part of this chat, once we're done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it so you'll be able to rewatch. Nev and Isabella, it was so great to meet you virtually. Thank you so much for doing this with this evening.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun. Thank you so much, Isabella. You are such a joy to talk to.
Yeah, same here. It was lots of fun. Absolutely great. Thanks.
Y'all have a good night.
Take care.